Today's guest, Bryan Clauson, and Bryan, the Circular Insanity Tour this year. How's the insanity going in the middle of April?
So far, so good. It's been a little bit of everything. We've dodged weather. We've changed plans a handful of times already, but so far, so good. I think tonight will be race 40 and 41, so probably just maybe a touch behind where we were looking to be at this point, but we knew we were going to lose some due to weather and things like that. So still on track, still plugging along. Obviously, you get through April and May without losing too many to weather. It certainly helps and makes the prospect of getting the numbers we need to get where we're going a little easier. But yeah, it's been good. It's been I feel like I always talk about and we have been doing some of the behind the scenes reality shows type stuff.
I was going to bring that up
on the cushion, and the hardest part for me to this point has been I feel like I've been traveling and racing and you get done and you're at 25 or 26 or 27 races and you're like, man, I
ways to go.
I don't think this is ever going to end. And but now that we're starting to creep into the 40 range and get to so hopefully in the next couple weeks get to 50, I feel like you finally at a number that's kind of feels like you've accomplished something.
This reality thing is it's blowing up. People are always talking about it. Talk about that a little bit on thecushion.com.
Yeah, it's really really funny kind of how it all came about. They actually approached us. I know they went through some stuff in the off season or the beginning of this year where they had lost some of their content and things like that they had in years past. So they were certainly looking at new ways to generate members and viewers and looking to have some content. And it was something that Lauren and I had actually talked about a lot. Not so much having a reality show or whatever the documentary type deal it is, but just something to help us document this year. It's going to be a year. I know she definitely will say, unlike any other in our life, where we're racing this much and traveling, and we're a good example. We were in Bloomington last night. Made our way here 8 hours later, and we're going to run the wing car in Knoxville tonight. So.
Two cars.
Yeah, two cars. So, it's a racing year unlike, probably any other I'll have in my career. We were looking for a way to document it and kind of have something to look back on. And it's really funny because, that's more Lauren's side of things as far as how it's going. I think I gave her the GoPro. I had the GoPro in my pocket when I came in here. But other than that, I don't even really watch them much, other than the occasional time when families around and want to see it. I don't really like watching myself, so we do it, and it seems to be going really well. And,
you were there the first time.
Yeah, exactly. But seems to be going really well, and I think certainly as we get into May and June, July, there's going to be a lot of fun stuff on there that people will be able to see, obviously with Indianapolis, and then we go into June, which is going to be a crazy month for us. I think we were looking at numbers the other day. I think we race like 36 or 38 races in the month of June. Obviously, there's some double ups there, but I think it was like 27 of 30 days or something silly like that that I'll be in a race car in the month of June.
Very good, very good. Now with this interview, I want to kind of turn back the clock a little bit, and about every year I look at your age and I think, dang, he's a lot younger, because you've been around forever, and that sort of thing, and you started at such a young age. Talk about you started in California, I think up to the age of 10 or so.
Yeah.
Talk about your young life out there in California, what was going on, and mom and dad and all those things.
Yeah, I grew up at the short tracks of California. My dad raced a lot of 360 sprint cars, a little bit of 410 stuff, but mainly was a 360 guy out there, and ran Placerville and Grass Valley and Chico and a lot of those places that I've gotten to go over the last couple of years, which has been really cool for me to get to go back to some of those places that I sat in the stands so many years watching my dad. But so grew up at the racetrack, and as silly as it sounds, I always tell a story. it's I actually got the opportunity to start racing because my dad actually got hurt in a sprint car and had to sit out for about 6 months, and I was just about to turn 5, and I'd been bugging him, and obviously he got bored in his 6 months off and started. Then he took me racing, and from there, just have kind of never looked back. And it's been more of it was never really about trying to be in Indiana by the time I was a certain age. It just was something that presented itself, an opportunity for my dad on his work side, and that made it work. And necessarily being a sprint car at a certain age, it's just been kind of a try to conquer where we're at and keep moving.
So you always wanted to do it. You saw Dad doing it out there. You had memories of that, and by the age of 5, I don't know if I knew what a car was.
Yeah.
And you're wanting to race one.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that age, it's not as much about you want to be an astronaut, you want to be a firefighter, you want to be a race car driver. Kids have dreams, and certainly I grew up around it. It was something that I spent a lot of time. My whole life to that point was really spent at the racetrack with my mom and dad, and but I think at that point, at 5, you want to do it to be like your dad, or spend time with your dad, or for us, going racing was like playing catch out in the yard. It's something that I think at 5 years old, I don't think you can really make that decision, but I think it's something that I definitely bugged him about and wanted to do as a kid, and yeah, it kind of just went from there. And obviously fell in love with it. Probably I always loved going racing and that, but I think obviously as you get to 11, 12, 13, you kind of start going, okay, no, I don't want to play these sports anymore. I want to focus on racing, or whatever it is. And obviously I've loved it and continue to love it.
Obviously your mom was along for the ride with your dad. So what about her? I mean, what's she thinking when you're jumping in a car at 5 and stuff?
She grew up around it too. My parents actually met at a quarter midget track when they were real young, and I probably shouldn't be able to go into super detail on how they got married, but they've known each other for met each other at the quarter midget track, and so it's something that she was around too from a young fairly young age at that point. And so obviously moms they're nervous, it's their kids out there, and but at the same time she was fairly comfortable with it, and has continued to support it. And obviously I have a younger sister, so a lot of times throughout our years growing up, it was mom and Taylor go play soccer, and dad and Bryan go racing, and mom gets to as many races as she can after soccer games, and dad goes to as many soccer games as he can to make the racing work. And I was fortunate to have supportive a good family life and a supportive family life that was able to make it happen. And nobody obviously there's a lot of sacrifices that always have to be made, especially as you continue to rise in the sport, but everybody was able to live a fairly normal life.
Yep. I think you're the youngest outlaw kart rookie of the year ever out there in the outlaw kart.
Shoot, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I think so.
How about that?
I think so. And then
I do know. I remember.
You might have that over Larson. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't even know anymore. I know at that time I kind of got lucky, and it happened a couple times throughout my career where
you were the only
I caught age. No, yeah, I was the only rookie. No, I caught age, not breaks necessarily because they were like, oh, you can race because whatever. It was just at that point in time, I think leading up to that point, the age on the outlaw kart stuff was 7 or 8, and they bumped it down to, or they dropped it down to 5, which got us involved. And same sort of deal actually when I went to micro racing. I got fairly lucky that the national rule that year that I kind of made the transition was it was 14 and it was bumped down to 12. I was able to get in at 12, and shortly after they moved it back to 14, so I got grandfathered in, which it doesn't sound like a huge deal, but obviously it's a couple years of your career really down the road, and who knows.
You get into the micros, you get into the Kenyan midgets, I believe, and you're in a sprint car by the time you're 14 in Indiana there. So
yeah, it was kind of a, looking back, I look at pictures of myself when I was actually 13 when I ran my first race, and turned 14 in the middle of the year, and you look at pictures of yourself and you're kind of like, oh, that might not have been the smartest thing, but it was more about a natural progression. It wasn't necessarily wanting to be the 13-year-old that was running a sprint car. It was year one in the micros. We stayed within our region, but we were in Indiana, Illinois area, and we won 6 or 7 races, and then year two in the micros we branched out, raced. We didn't go to California or anything, but we did Tulsa. We kind of traveled all over the country, and I think we won 22 out of 40 races. I think at that 46 or 47 races that year, including the Tulsa Shootout, which is the Chili Bowl or Knoxville Nationals of micro racing. It's everybody's there, and so it was more about not getting stagnant, not not trying to become the world's greatest micro driver. It was about felt like we had learned maybe not as much as we could, but when you're winning over 50% of the time, I think it's certainly time to look at moving on if you can. And I was fortunate enough to have some really good people surrounding me at that point. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. The first sprint car I was supposed to drive, the guy that got us out of micros, never actually materialized, and we kind of scrambled the end of that year. And my dad, along with a guy named Joe Perry in Indianapolis, and then to start kind of my sprint car career, he lent us a motor, and we spent the first year with the 360 running at Kokomo locally, and then in 2000, that would have been 2014, the Armstrongs, Craig and Neil Armstrong, which their kids are running. I think Dakota's running nationwide, and Caleb, Neil's son, runs the All Stars right now. So they stepped up and helped us put together kind of a more legitimate sprint car operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had success. I think you had a half dozen wins maybe that first year, and then by the time you're 16 and you're old enough to run USAC, I think you ran third in your first USAC race, didn't you?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Was that at Lima?
Yeah, it was at Lima. It was one of those races. If I had any clue what I was really doing, or wasn't as amped up about it, about being my first USAC race. Obviously, you spend the years of 14, 15 racing with a lot of those guys, but USAC is USAC, and at that point you're like, oh my God, this is the biggest race of my life, and yada yada. And you ended up running third. Actually got to, I think we were 3 wide for the lead in lap traffic, and just kind of got beat through traffic a little bit, but raced wheel to wheel with, at that point it was Levi and Levi Jones, and Jay Drake was in the TSR car. So obviously kind of set the stage early that we felt like we could compete, and but I think a lot of that goes back to the Indiana short track scene at that point, especially the non-wing side of things is it's so different than anything else you see, because you go to Bloomington on a Friday night when there's no USAC races, and you'll see Dave Darlin. It might not be in the Walker car, but you'll see Dave Darlin. You'll see Brady might have his own car out. You see a lot of these guys maybe driving different cars. Stambro usually pops up. So at 14, 15 years old, I was racing with the all-time, not at that point, but who became the all-time sprint car win leader, and probably when he decides to hang it up, will have a really high mark for anybody to come after. And Dave, so I was trained and cut my teeth racing with those guys, and so I think that certainly made the transition to the national level a little bit easier.
Takes away a little bit of the awe when you raced with them before.
I think they're still you're 16, so you're like USAC is especially in that time was a really big deal. That's where everybody was coming from. it seemed like if you won there, you moved on and went to the next level. And for me, it was never really about that, but it still was certainly, certainly did have some prestige.
Yep, absolutely. And what made Chip Ganassi give you notice? What was the key there, do you think?
It's a good question.
You're not sure about that?
I'm not sure. Actually, obviously we.
It was a different time as far as
it was a little
NASCAR
bit different time. I
thing.
think at that point they were really digging deep, and the driver development side of things was a lot more prominent. They were actually going out and spending their own money on you instead of taking your money. But certainly the business model has changed in the 10 years that I've been racing. But it's I think obviously they look at the same things that I just talked about. I actually had the contract on the desk before I ran my first USAC race. So I'd like to say that it was that Lima race or whatever. I think that just kind of reiterated and made them feel good about what they had decided. But I think when you look at it, you see a 15-year-old kid racing every night with Dave Darlin and not beating him every night, but competing. And then also at that time, the pavement side of things was still going on. Obviously I wasn't old enough to run a midget, but I was running the Kenyan midgets, which were kind of flourishing back then at the Speedrome, and was really a really good venue for them. And so I had the pavement experience too that kind of took a little bit of the edge off of the worry about the transition. So and the best story about, sorry to be long-winded, best Chip story in that whole deal is the night after Lima was probably one of my lesser, my least favorite USAC nights of my career. I crashed in hot laps at Eldora and actually ended up on a helicopter out of there. But Chip happened to be coming to watch me, and he was hovering above he couldn't land because the life flight was taking off with me in it. And he landed and he was all mad and yelling at Tony, what's going on? What are you doing? And then Tony's, well, what are you doing here? He's like, I came to watch Clauson. He's like, well, there he goes. And so, it's not my finest moment of my career, but it's funny. But that kind of, obviously was a little bit of a hiccup in the whole plan a little bit. But and then but that kind of set the stage for a lot of the time I spent with Keith was through Chip and their development program, and kind of just went from there. Yep,
and got a win in ARCA. You spent a couple years in the Busch Series. I think you're in the Busch Nationwide transition there. When they transitioned there. When you look back at that, you look at the age you were, all that sort of thing. Were you ready for that? Is that somewhere you want to get back to? These are a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think I get that question a lot. Obviously, anybody would be lying to you if they sat up here and said they wouldn't take the opportunity if it came back around, or the right opportunity, I should say. I think my time spent down there was, I don't know. I obviously feel like, I feel like there's probably some unfinished business a little bit, but at the same time, I'm better for it. I've been able to do a lot of things on the short track side of things, just taking what I learned from what went wrong when I was down south, and obviously, and a big part of that was, big part of what I learned from that was used in putting the Chasing 200 tour together, and I think at the time, I don't think it really had anything to do with not being ready skill-wise, because we had some really good runs, and I think, and it was a little bit different time down there back then. There was 20 Cup guys, so if you ran 15th in a nationwide race, you were doing really good. Whereas now there's not. So if you don't run in the top 5, I don't think anybody really looks at it as anything else. So the times have kind of changed, but I think it was more not being prepared for the outside the car stuff, not even the appearances, everything that went along with it, but the business side, making sure you protect yourself and kept tabs on things, and knowing how to deal with uncomfortable situations or that this and that. It's hard to do at 17, 18 years old, and from that standpoint, I wasn't ready. But from the driving side, I think I was
that's the case a lot of times, isn't it? I mean, there's very few drivers that get chosen for this that are low on skill.
Yeah.
Just,
I think it was more. I think at that age, you just probably trust people more than you should. And in the end, it is a business, and people have to protect themselves in the same right. So, lessons. That was my college education.
when you signed with Tony Stewart Racing, I think it was 2010. Was he? Did that have anything to do with your time down south?
No, not really.
Not really.
I mean, obviously, I knew Tony. Got to know him. Met him 1,000 times when I was younger, coming up through, and always dreamed about driving for him. But it just kind of happened. They had their Silver Crown deal. I can't remember if they had expanded to 2 car, or no, they had 2 cars for a while, but so long ago I forget exactly what happened. But I was actually driving home from, actually declined his phone call when he called me because I didn't recognize the number. I was actually buying a car at the time, so he called me and ignore and listened to the voicemail after. I was like, oh, probably shouldn't have done that, but called him back and he just asked if I had any interest in running it, and which was kind of a little bit of a shock to me because I had no experience in the Silver Crown division, but a race car's a race car.
A race car's a race car, and you've driven a bunch of them. USAC National Driver of the Year. I think you won 2 midget titles by now, right?
Yep.
2 sprint titles.
Yep.
And the national deal 3 times? Or?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. All 3 years.
And you've driven for both your own family's team, but also you won a title with them, but also Keith Koons. And talk about Keith a little bit. A lot of people I think have a misperception that Keith puts a lot of money into this and that sort of thing, which he does. But he works so hard, and I don't think people realize how hard he works for what he gets.
Yeah, those guys, him and Pete both work their butts off, and especially right now. I mean, people forget, that in 2009 maybe. Sorry, I might be a little off on my dates, but whenever they made the switch to Toyota, they spent 2 or 3 agonizing years, struggling. And in that time, while Toyota was getting their stuff together and getting Rick Long and the Speedway package put together, those guys had to work awfully hard just to be competitive every night. So I think, when you spend a year or 2 doing that, and then you get an engine package like they have now, you've seen obviously over the last few years, they've been really tough to beat. And I spent a lot of time with Keith, and Keith he's very smart at around the race cars, and is funny as it sounds or whatever. We had a lot of success together on the pavement, but we honestly, really, when you think of both of our resumes, when we raced together on the dirt, we kind of struggled really for what you'd think we'd be able to do. But a lot of that is just everybody's different, and my way of doing things didn't line up with his way, but obviously they've fostered a lot of great success over the last couple decades, and it's very hard to sustain what they've done over the years, and not only sustain but just survive. I mean, this is a tough sport, and there's been times where I'm sure they probably didn't have much. They probably ate a lot of bologna and things like that, and now they're paying dividends because their business model is a lot better now than it used to be. So, but they've certainly worked for that and earned that, and they do a good job.
We need to talk about Indy too, 2012. Talk about the opportunity you got there.
Yeah, obviously 2012 was kind of fostered through the I forget what they called it, but the Driver of the Year, USAC Drivers Championship or whatever. Along with that, was when Randy Bernard was in office at IndyCar. I forget what exactly, if he was CEO or whatever.
Yeah.
But head of it, he was heading the ship, and they got together and put together a scholarship, which was really about half of what it takes to do an Indy 500 program. So, we was fortunate enough to win that, and then had the opportunity through a lot of our partners, through the scholarship, through a lot of Sarah Fisher and Wink Hartman, their sponsors and Wink's personal money. I got the opportunity to go to Indianapolis in 2012, and that was a really cool time for me. Not only because it was, obviously it's Indianapolis. It's, growing up in Indy, that's the mecca of motorsports. It's.
What does that feel like when you get out there on that track?
It's hard to describe because you're going 230 mile an hour, 240 mile an hour, so you don't have time to really think. But I mean, it's really cool. It's one of those things you do, and you're in the moment, and you're going, and you don't really think of it, and then you sit back at the end of it and go, man, I can't believe I was, out there doing that, or part of this or whatever. And the craziest part for me in that first year was, you spend a week and a half there testing and qualifying and getting ready for the race. Then you show up on race day and there's all these people, and it looks completely different. Like turn one went from looking this big to looking this big because there's colors and there's people everywhere, and it was nuts. And just looking around and on the parade lap and stuff, it's pretty special.
That help you with your experience last year a little bit, going there second time?
Yeah, it's certainly. Yes and no. It did because 2012.
I know the race ended early, but
2012 was a very I'd say a very good year for us at the Speedway. Obviously, the end of it wasn't what we had hoped, but throughout the month, we were top 10 at almost every day in practice. We had a qualifying incident, but through 3 1/4 laps, we were sitting 11th on the grid, which would have been spectacular for our first shot at Indianapolis. So I think it proved to myself that I could do it. The transition wasn't. I won't say that it wasn't that hard, because it was, but it wasn't so unbelievably challenging that it couldn't be done. And a lot of that credit is goes to Sarah and their team, because they brought a really fast race car for me in 2012, and that's a little bit of what I was lacking in 2015. It was kind of the exact opposite. We rolled out, we struggled. Didn't have any speed, couldn't get comfortable, and the hard thing as a driver at Indianapolis, we can find tenths of mile an hour. We can't find you 1 or 2 or 3 mile an hour. We can find you a half a mile an hour. We can find you 3/10 of a mile an hour. We can't find you 3 mile an hour. It just isn't.
It's not there.
Juan Montoya couldn't jump in my car and go 3 mile an hour faster. From day one maybe, because there's certainly a time of working into it, but by day 3 or 4, when you're running flat and do the whole deal, like they're so, I shouldn't say so under power, but you're stuck, you're flat. There's only so much you can do as a driver to find speed. And so, that's the frustrating part. We had to work for every little bit last year and just never got there. I mean, it just wasn't there for whatever reason, and it was a fairly miserable month, honestly. And it was one of those that certainly earned your money. It is a good paying couple of weeks at the office, but there's times in there that I would have gladly went home and taken a pay cut, because it was just tough.
Yep, just tough. And the unique thing I thought about last year was the trip you did to Kokomo afterwards. I know.
Yeah.
I think Casey McManus was a part of that. I was just watching him on DVR last night on Deadliest Catch. He's one of the captains on Deadliest Catch, and I talked to him at the Nationals about that. He loved that. I think he introduced a lot of people to the dirt side of the sport, and vice versa.
Actually, it was it turned out to be a really, really cool deal. Lauren and David Bird and my girlfriend Lauren, they did a great job putting it together, and we weren't really sure what we were going to have. Obviously, the first time you do things like that, you don't really know. Felt like we put together a package that financially made sense to go do, because it was so cheap in comparison to if you were to do everything on its own separately. And it was a lot of fun. I think I had we had 100 people. I think I had like 18 family members that left, 80 some odd fans, and I'd say probably about 50 of them had only been to dirt races and never been to the Speedway, and there was probably 20 or 30 of them that had only been to the Speedway and never been to a dirt race. So it was really cool to kind of cross everybody's, get them all mixed together and introduce them to each type, and it was a really neat night for us, and to have them there to kind of share in that, and then obviously introduce some of those fans to great short track racing, which is something I'm very passionate about, especially Kokomo Speedway. But to kind of introduce them to that was pretty special for me, and it was really cool. A week and a half later, or 2 weeks later, I think we were at Farmington, and had a couple that did the double from St. Louis drive to Farmington just because they had so much fun. So that was what it was about for us, was kind of introducing some people to the dirt track stuff, and obviously taking some of our fans and bringing them to the short track stuff as well, or to the Speedway as well. So it worked out really well. Did it again this year. We're up to 200 people. I kind of had to cut it off there. We probably could have done 300, 400, 500, but just from a logistical standpoint and manpower and buses, and we have a lot of people that donate and sponsor tickets and things like that. So we have to put a cap on it somewhere, but I have 200 this year doing it, and obviously we've learned some stuff to maybe make it a little bit better, and should be fun again.
Yep, absolutely. And I think for a lot of the older fans in Indiana, it takes them back to a different time when that was the norm. They'd race at IRP, or and then they'd race the Indy 500 or whatever it is. So I think there's that aspect too, and of course you're bringing all the sprint car and midget fans in as well.
Well, I joked last year, and it is fairly serious. They keep me out of it, and this year actually I'm getting a little bit of reprieve, because to get to 200 races you kind of have to do some even in the middle of May. But they kept me out of a sprint car for 2.5 weeks. First thing I'm doing when I get done with the Indy 500 is going sprint car racing. So if it's Sunday night or if it's Monday, I can't actually go Monday. I am, because they make you go to the banquet to get your check. But
yeah, you better show up for that.
But whenever that first opportunity was, that's when I was going, and obviously with Kokomo being Sunday night, that's when it turns out to be.
We're getting down the home stretch here. I want to talk about 2014. You started running a little more wing stuff. Last year you really made a commitment to it. Talk to me about what it is about the winged racing that appeals to you.
Well, it started kind of as I'd always wanted to do it, but never knew really anything about it, if I could do it, if I would be able to do it. You don't see really anybody crossing over that much, especially from a day-to-day standpoint. Even, Kyle, when he was jumping around, he picked and chose. He was picking and choosing his spots, and he knew what he was good at, and he'd get in the non-wing cars there, and so you don't really see anybody. So I really had no idea whether I was going to go out there and be terrible, or I was going to go out there and be really good. And I was got the opportunity with from Todd and Susan LaHaze and the Buffalo Wild Wings team. Blazing Racing, I think, is the technical name for it, but everybody knows who they are. Greg McCormick and all those guys over there gave me the opportunity, and we came here about 5 or 6 times and watched it rain. and came here one other time and broke an axle in qualifying, so our night was done. So that year we kind of rolled into the Nationals without really a whole lot of experience, and we came to, I think the Capitani was really the first race I got to run here anyways, and I did some stuff out west to start the year with them, but once we got back to the Midwest, Capitani was kind of the first race, and missed the show, and then went to Oskaloosa the next night and missed the show. So we were kind of worried going into, or I was worried. They were having a ball watching me flounder, I guess, but learning and doing that, and then obviously came here and I think ran 5th on our prelim night, and locked in. So that was
Yeah.
pretty special night, and it was kind of at that point where
I can do this.
Yeah, obviously some things kind of aligned that night to put us in that position, but at the end of the day, still in the Knoxville Nationals. So I kind of sat back and thought about it over the course of the season. It's kind of twofold that that happened, and then I was kind of going through a time in the USAC side where kind of just got to a point where I wasn't having as much fun. I wasn't just kind of getting stagnant and wasn't challenging myself. You go run second and it's a bad night, whether it's from 20th or from the pole. It didn't matter. You run second, it was the world was ending. So I needed something to kind of refresh, regroup, kind of get the juices flowing again a little bit. And I kind of got to a point there in 14 where I really didn't care if I went to the racetrack. I mean, I was happy to take a weekend off, and that's when I knew it was time. I didn't know what I needed to do, but I needed to do something different. I just needed to change it up. And at that point I had been racing, I came back full time in USAC in 10, in 9 I ran a lot. So, I mean, I'd been, back on the road with them for 7 years, and it just got to the point where I was just kind of, bored isn't the word, but just got to where I could take it or leave it.
I think challenge was a key word you said.
Yeah.
You need challenge, and it was a challenge for you.
Yeah, and certainly climbed in the wing car, and it wasn't easy. And there was nights we looked really good, and there was nights we looked really bad. And I've really enjoyed the process of getting to where we are today, where we've came from, where we are today, and hopefully we need to continue to get better to be where I want to be.
Well, from a year ago, in the spring, you joined up with Matt Wood Racing in the 17W, and crew chief Shane Bowers came along, and we've talked about this before, but what a difference there is between the California trip a year ago and this year, where your top 10s, top fives, you're in contention every night up front, and how far that team has come has got to be really encouraging for you.
Yeah, it is. It's I'm really proud of everybody's effort, and it was kind of a unique situation, and we were really, really young as a team. Obviously went out west with nobody. It was me, one crew guy, Adam, and Matt and Cole, and so we were, really didn't know what we were doing, and we were just trying to go out there to get laps so that we were ready when we found somebody to crew chief it, and honestly tried to hire about 10 guys, which thankfully fell through, because I wholeheartedly believe we found the absolute best guy for the job. Shane is a pretty outstanding pedigree when you look at what he's done in the sport. Never really as the crew chief per se, but he was a part of Donnie's championships. I think he won Knoxville 4 or 5 times with Donnie. He's part of Jason Myers' World of Outlaws championship. So he's been around winners and knows what it takes. And he kind of came in late, early in the year, but it was still April. We had cars built, so we spent all last year trying to get caught up, trying to get things built how he wanted, trying to get our motor program where it needed to be. And from the other standpoint, Matt was fairly young as a car owner too. He'd always raced with his kid, and that's certainly a transition that is. It's different when you are hiring somebody to go drive your race car. It's different than having your kid, and it's how things are handled. Just from top to bottom, it's just a little bit different. For him, obviously when you're spending money on your kid, it's a little easier to justify. But he's been great. He's been obviously very patient with me, and from the very beginning, I was pretty upfront with him. And he called me right after Chili Bowl last year, and we talked about the whole deal. And I said, "Look, hey, if you expect me to go win 10 times next year, don't hire me. I'm not your guy. I'm not gonna. It's just not going to happen. I hope it does. I mean, I hope it does, but I don't think it's going to happen. So if that's your expectations, let's just not do it, because everybody's going to end up upset. And so he's been very patient in the process, and I feel like like you said, even middle of last year when we kind of got our feet underneath us, we had some good nights. Quick time at the Kings Royal. Won a Friday night here and had a really good run on Saturday night. Didn't really have a finish to show for it, but we came from 16th or 17th. I think we started 16th with the Rico thing. But 16th, we were 6th or 7th at one point in the race. And so we had some really strong runs throughout the summer, but to go into the off season, let the guys work on everything, work on our engine program to come out at Volusia, run top 5 with the Outlaws, and then go on the swing with them and run up front on most nights. Have our bad nights being 9ths and 10ths.
Right.
It shows how far we've come as a team, and still obviously have a little bit of work to do to be the Donnies and the KKRs where their bad nights are 4th and 5th, but we're getting there and we're running with those guys, and the only way to get better is to get to that point to where you can race with them night in and night out, and then that stuff will come.
Absolutely.